trying to break away from the norm is pretty important. Question the status quo. And that was one of my biggest learning is trying to understand why this is a status quo as opposed to why not, right? There's always a question of this is how we do it and why can't we not do it any other way? So I probably put it as a why not approach and also thinking about as opposed to what's possible, then how to make it possible. I think that was huge.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Kerrie Jordan. Welcome to our show where we talk with industry leaders who are driving the future of manufacturing. Today, I'm speaking with Srinivas Suresh, supply chain lead at Joby Aviation, which is a California-based company building quiet, all-electric aircraft to connect people like never before. And with the ability to take off and land vertically, the Joby aircraft will change the way we move while reducing the acoustic and climate footprint of flight. A bit about my guest, Srinivas Suresh, is recognized for bringing a dynamic approach to operations. He has experience in scaling product launches from prototype to full production, and his career spans several industries: electric vehicles, commercial drones, consumer electronics, industrial robotics, and now aircraft manufacturing. He's held roles at Nimble Robotics, Apple, Impossible Aerospace, and Tesla. Now, as supply chain lead at Joby Aviation, he oversees global supply management, supplier industrialization, and material planning. So, talk about emerging technologies and cutting edge manufacturing. Srinivas, I'm so excited to have you. Welcome and thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for that awesome introduction, Kerrie. Excited to be here and thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, great. Well, first, let's get to know you. Could you tell us about your background and a bit about Joby Aviation?
Yeah, I hail from India, moved to Dubai for my schooling for a long time, then moved to States to pursue higher education. So being state bound since 2012 and building my career in procurement, supply chain operations, manufacturing operations. As you said, different roles in different companies at different maturity stages. So, and yeah, here I am with Joby Aviation. Pretty exciting. And talking about Joby. So yeah, we're building the next generation of transportation. As you said, quite efficient, emissions free, and saving people time and bringing that much needed transportation for everyone in the world.
That's so exciting. And I was just looking at some of the materials that are posted out there about Joby Aviation, doing a little bit of homework. And I saw Neil
Mhm.
deGrasse Tyson was in the pilot seat of one. That was pretty cool.
Yes, indeed. That's been talked for days for Joby. Yeah,
I
definitely
bet.
exciting times.
So you have worked across these multiple industries, and they do sound a bit related, right? Because they're very, cutting edge technology.
Mhm.
So what excites you the most about, the future of manufacturing in these sectors?
I think the part that excites me, the same excitement that I had at Tesla, Apple, and every other company that I was previously part of, was we're all focusing on building the new generation of supply chain. And when I talk about supply chain, this covers, what your suppliers do, your manufacturing operations, your supply chain operations. It's very atypical when you're working on a new technology. None of these products and manufacturing processes exist. So you're going about building, identifying and building those supply chain. And I think that's the best part of my job, getting to do that time and again on different industries and newer products and technology. That's the best part of my job.
I feel like I can relate in product management. We are builders at heart. So it's great to be able to build something. I love it. No, it's not always easy for sure, especially when there's so much that needs to get defined or built, or it's, going from zero to one. So what are some of the challenges that you've had to face? I guess not only in that building phase, but then once you get to the built from zero to one to maybe one to 10, one to 100, one to 1,000, how do you scale?
The challenges from first principles have been pretty much the same across industries because we're all working towards new technology. Fundamentally, you're after rapid iteration, enabling rapid iteration. you're also working towards a lot of unknowns, things that you don't necessarily know about, right? And the last one is problem solving. I think these are the three biggest challenges when you talk about supply chain manufacturing across the board, and being able to come up with a strategy on how to effectively mitigate these. Maybe, for example, let's talk about rapid iteration. That's the name of the game for all new technologies, right? You know you're not going to get it right the first time. Building a strategy on how to address rapid iteration, in my view, it's all about design, build, test, learn. That's the cycle that you need to expedite with your manufacturing partners. If you think about it, this is where industries struggle. Most of the orthodox industries, they struggle to innovate because they're kind of very slow in iteration, which basically means they're not doing fast enough design, build, test, learn. So that's one of the key areas as manufacturing. You want to start thinking about how to be super quick, being able to move with velocity, not just speed, but with velocity. And what I mean by velocity is with the right solution and speed. And sometimes speed just means picking a solution and running with it, but that doesn't necessarily achieve the results. The second one is looking at the unknown challenges, right? Sometimes you have to work with unknown challenges, and it's all about planning for them, understanding things that could go wrong, whether it's from process, design, material, manufacturing challenges, things that could go wrong, and trying to plan around it, whether the plan could be a simultaneous path of manufacturing or change in material, or having manufacturing locations. Maybe Asia is one of them, producing the same in North America. So those would be your mitigation plans. And the last one I think I spoke about is problem solving. That's always about understanding the outcome of a problem solving, trying to understand your best case and your worst case. Being able to foresee that is extremely powerful because that kind of gives you the destiny. And these are kind of the 8 very typical challenges when you're working on new technology, any industry. That's what I've seen in my experience. And obviously, the next comes the production hell, as we all have seen in many companies. And some companies have done it pretty well. Like maybe talk about Apple. They scale production from 0 to 100 every year. And I think in some cases, probably every 6 months. And Tesla has been a great example of being able to do it with Model 3. And they've been able to replicate that with the subsequent products that they manufactured, like Model Y and so on. But yeah, I think that's kind of the fundamental approach on scaling production, understanding your challenges and going from prototype to full scale.
That makes a lot of sense. And if we could get a little bit more detail in terms of your experience. So, how has that experience that you mentioned, like with Tesla and others, really shaped your approach to supply chain management?
Quite a lot. I mean, maybe I'll talk about from a very first principle basis, understanding, what not to do. I think that's probably the best thing I've learned across my career. Lessons learned is what not to do. And I think that kind of pushes you to do the right thing when you automatically decide, this is not what I want to do. And having that from, learning that from scratch, especially when the company itself is building the supply chain, is huge because you're part of the process. You're not alone in that learning process. You're with the company that's actually facilitating, enabling you to be thinking outside of the box, right? That's one. I could also think about, when Tesla or in some cases, the startups that I work with, there is a decorum, there is an industry norm. Talk about vehicle, like car industry, talk about aviation. Trying to break away from the norm is pretty important. Question the status quo. And that was one of my biggest learning, is trying to understand why this is a status quo as opposed to why not, right? There's always a question of this is how we do it and why can't we not do it any other way? So I probably put it as a why not approach, and also thinking about as opposed to what's possible, then how to make it possible. I think that was huge when I look back in time at Tesla, Apple, and my startup experience. It's always about how to make it possible and not what's possible within that realm. I think those are the biggest takeaways that have helped me over time that I'm trying to actually, as a company at Joby, that we are very taking it very close to heart and going back to those first principles, because you ask these fundamental questions, you're accomplishing your cost, schedule, and quality objectives.
So when you're in this kind of environment where you are at the cutting edge, and as you said, maybe there are some norms, maybe there's not, because maybe it's something that is brand new.
Yeah.
How do you create the type of culture where it's okay to, maybe suggest these kinds of ideas that could be very different, as you're saying, challenge the status quo? What sort of, how do you create that kind of culture where it's okay to have those kinds of tough conversations?
I think it stems from leadership for the most part. I think it's two-pronged. One is you need the company level leadership to be aligned
Mhm.
and be able to think outside of the box with you. And there have been some great examples, like Apple has a phenomenal supply chain. Tesla, Elon himself in his tweet, I mean, he talks about supply chain and manufacturing so much. I think that's been what has really unlocked how companies start to think about supply chain. In fact, some of the big supply chain folks come from Tesla and Apple. Like, I think that's a great example of companies starting to adopt. And the other part of this culture is that you've been able to see over a period of time how companies have been able to adapt their supply chain, being able to build supply chain strategies that are adaptable and susceptible to micro and macro business needs. And also, moreover, if you think about designing your supply chain, you want to plan for the best and the worst case scenarios. I think that is really, really important. And being able to get visibility on the outcomes of supply chain engineering and strategizing all the way up to leadership level is important, because supply chain is not just about buying something, getting it manufactured by someone and then adding to your own product. It's no longer that. It's a lot more to that. And I think that's the biggest revolution.
Well, I have to ask you about supply chain disruptions. I mean,
Yep.
you're talking a lot about, the resilience and how you can, ensure there's flexibility. So, how have you overcome supply chain disruptions? And it would be really interesting to hear about it in terms of, maybe some stories that have happened to you while at Joby or at another organization, or maybe those that you've seen in the industry. How are
Yep.
you dealing with those supply chain disruptions? Because there are so many and they only continue to come.
I think it's many pronged. One is, thinking from a first principle basis is actually understanding what your constraints are. From a high level, it could be geopolitical tension, it could be material shortage, natural disasters, unforeseen circumstances that can result in disruptions of any kind, right?
Mhm.
So being able to at least understand what those are and trying to build flexibility all the way from design, because when you manufacture something, it doesn't stop or start at manufacturing. It should start from design. When
Mhm.
you're designing something, you need to understand how to build that flexibility, whether it's picking the material of choice, whether it's choosing a manufacturing process, also a manufacturing location. Some of the examples, like I think companies that did this really, really well, Tesla did that really well. They were able to overcome the semiconductor shortage, where other car companies were stuck with unfinished inventory. Tesla, on the other hand, were cranking cars left, right, and center. The other one I could think about during my time at Apple was being able to diversify supply chain. They saw something that many companies failed to see at that point in time. They built a whole supply chain, I would say, whole levels of supply chain, the tier twos, the tier threes, and the tier ones in a whole different country, given that how strong their footprint is in China. So those are things that companies have been really, really successful, being able to plan for disruption, but also it's easier said than done. Some of this take years of planning, years of forecasting of what those challenges could be, but it has to happen. I think the first activity is actually being able to forecast your constraints and the relative disruptions.
Well, can I ask you about sustainability? It's a topic that comes up very often among manufacturers, both internationally as well as US based. And of course, with Joby Aviation being, an all electric, quiet aircraft, what role does sustainability play within your organization?
It's fantastic. Sustainability is super, super important to Joby. If you think about it, sustainability is center of what we do and how we do. Supply chain is really no different. But when it really comes to supply chain in action, right, we have a job to be done, right? We just get the product to market. Being able to understand the intersection of sustainability, cost, schedule, manufacturing, and business objectives is really, really important. And I think our approach has been always thinking about what are the areas where we can have immediate impact and roll sustainability in places where we can. That's where we can, get the ground running. There are areas, obviously, there are challenges on material processes and manufacturing where we do have to think about what that medium and long-term plan looks like. And ultimately, it's trying to build those plans, being able to forecast what those time-driven, cost-driven challenges are, and being able to commit to those changes is how we see it. Because as a company, maybe think about as a pre-revenue company, being 100% solely focused on sustainability is not going to help us hit our business goals. So we do need to take a step back and understand how we can play this out while addressing the business challenges, right? So that's how we take sustainability at Joby, and obviously it's a very big part of what we do here and what we are after.
That's great. That's great. It's great to hear. Well, on the show, we typically talk about technology and different
Yeah.
ways technology is impacting manufacturing. So I'd love to understand from your perspective at Joby, and especially as you're looking across the supply chain, what technologies have you chosen to leverage? What has had the most impact? And, maybe even as you're thinking about the future, what other technologies are you excited about?
The one that I feel that we have to continue to leverage and work towards is, let me put it this way, data intelligence. Data is everything if you think about supply chain and manufacturing, right? How you do it, where you buy it, what you pay, lead time, schedule, etc. Being able to build data, scale data, governing data, analyzing data is going to help you make so many decisions on supply chain and manufacturing. And I feel there's been so much focus on this in the last couple of years. If you think about it, there are so many startups trying to preach to companies like you need this data. I agree with them, and I think that's what I'm really really looking forward to is technologies that are geared towards bringing this data easily accessible and available and enabling decision. And I don't want companies or rather these technologies to stop by just bringing data to the table, but meaningful actions coming out of it and facilitating that is just as important, is what I'm really excited about. And also thinking about, in the long run, supply chain systems automation, just having talked about data, supply chain system automation is what is going to really canvas that data across your supply chain manufacturing. If you think about raw material being produced, processed, machined into a part, then finally being put in an aircraft, the data behind that can tell you stories of how you can optimize for cost, quality, and schedule. And ultimately, it is minimizing, or rather, in other words, maximizing value for everyone involved in that supply chain manufacturing and ultimately benefiting the end customer, which is you have maximum value at the lowest cost possible.
What kind of supply chain insights do you pull from the data that you're leveraging? Maybe using suppliers or but how do you use data across supply
Yeah,
chain?
we look at supply location, we look at the revenue, the financial health, the supply chain risk. For example, how many disruptions, logistics disruptions we've had for shipments coming from Panama Canal, as an example. The Suez Canal is another example. We also look at quality data, supplier quality. Sometimes suppliers tend to ship good parts,
Mm.
but the behind the scenes is they're probably throwing half of it away. and you don't learn about it. But when you get the data, you see that something is not happening right. That allows you to go and incentivize to have those discussions. Like, what can we do to help you so that your preceding supply chain nodes are being able to optimize for cost and quality. And ultimately, you're the one to benefit because that specific supplier is no longer throwing 50% of the parts away. And that's typically how I've seen data being used in many industries, including Tesla and Apple. But the adoption of this has been, I would say, underwhelming in most cases. And I think the last 12, 24 months, there has been a lot of talk about this. So definitely very, very excited. How many other ways that we can think about using this data?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up data because it is pretty remarkable the acceleration of technology to leverage it, to collect it, to cleanse it, to make sure that you have complete data to be making decisions based upon. And then there's also the question of, well, can you trust the forecasts of the data? Should you rely upon the previous information? And it is just interesting the way this is continuing to evolve. When you are empowering your team with data, what steps do you take, or how do you think about what they should have access to? How do you protect it? Do you have like KPIs that you set up across your business in terms of what they should be working towards when it comes to data? How do you empower your team to leverage it?
Governance is just as important as, having data. And maybe, one of the first approaches is building that pipeline of data, identifying what that data should be. And second is building governance around data, like who gets to see what. And using the same data, then decisions are being made, how do those actually, going back in time, converge with the data that you see? Sometimes you're making a decision that may or may not make sense when you start looking at the data behind it. So it's being able to drive more facts to decision making and being able to justify a certain decision being made because of the data that supports it. And again, quality of data is just as important too. So you want to base your decisions on high fidelity data. And that's also one of the important aspects to look at because sometimes just making a decision on data doesn't mean you're doing the right thing. It's the quality of data that you need to be looking at as well. So it really comes down to building that right pipeline, governing the data that you want to actually use for decision making is where I would start with.
Yeah, I love that. Thinking about it as a pipeline to then you feed and then you can leverage the insights that are being delivered afterwards. What advice do you have for other manufacturing leaders that are out there who are likely navigating, tight resource constraints, right? There's
Yeah.
the fluctuating costs of materials, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, potential geopolitical supply chain disruptions, on the horizon. There's just a lot of ambiguity out there. What advice do you offer other manufacturing leaders when you're speaking with them?
I try to focus on just one thing, build strategies that can adapt, that can be resilient. Because if you are building a strategy that's neither of these, then you're kind of stuck. It's important to plan and replan. And what time has told us again and again is that anything could happen, right? So building strategies around that. And the last one is embrace, adapt changes. And I think we are slowly moving to a world where AI is taking over. And I do feel, in general sense, like AI can supplement a lot of supply chain decisions, manufacturing decisions. So it's really important that we start embracing these changes.
Great advice. Well, when you're looking out, at the different trends that are happening across the industry in manufacturing, and this could even be maybe different technologies that are on the horizon that have maybe not yet been brought to fruition, but you're excited about them. What sort of technologies or different trends in manufacturing do you think are going to redefine supply chain over the next 10 years or so?
I definitely think a lot has been done and talked about robotics. I think combination of robotics and AI is really going to revolutionize supply chain and manufacturing. Right now, if you think about manufacturing, cars, vehicles, they have high level of automation. If you think about consumer electronics, they have high intensity of changes because you have a new phone or a new laptop every 6 months. And when you look at aviation, aviation is catching up in some sense because you don't have the volumes that you need to automate, and also you don't talk about changes as frequently as consumer electronics. So I think that's where the combination of AI and robotics is going to help these new industries that are trying to catch up, where they may not have enough volumes or enough need for change. And I think that's where really AI robotics is going to help across the board, not just the aviation.
Yeah, it is exciting how, I mean, robotics has just dramatically accelerated in terms of the abilities, its uptake, adoption across the industry, and what we can do when we potentially incorporate AI. So there's just so much that's happening. Well, as we're wrapping up, is there anything that I didn't ask you about? Any final thoughts that you wanted to share? And please tell me it's what's going on with the drones over the US.
Drones is such an amazing thing. I feel like that's one of the things we should have spent a lot of time building that infrastructure. We didn't. Maybe some of us saw that coming, but I think yeah, we're in the catching up game on the drone side. Yeah, talking about questions. No, I think we hit on everything I would have wanted to talk about. So
Have you ever flown in an electric aircraft?
no, I haven't. I've managed to put myself in when it was in a stationary position. Yes, I've been inside one, but not actually flown one. We have trained pilots at Joby who have done this, actually do it every day.
Really?
But over a period of time, I think we will slowly start having people who are no longer trained pilots taking passengers very, very soon.
Do you think people are ready for an electric aircraft?
I think so. I think so. People are ready. And I think it also starts adopting new technologies. If you think about,
Yeah.
there's always a fear factor with every new technology. If you think like you talk about aviation, the invention of flight, moving people from point A to point B. Now taking a flight is as synonymous to taking a car ride. Like that's how we talk about. Like, hey, I'm coming to LA. We just assume that that person is going to fly. And I think that time is what is going to tell, like how quickly people are going to adopt, and being able to understand your market needs and catering them is super important because we can't just go and start throwing solution at people. It's about understanding where the problem is and addressing that problem with the solution, as opposed to just giving solution to people who probably don't have a need for it.
In my mind, I'm picturing this as flying cars because there's already electric
Yes.
cars. So now I'm thinking you're inventing flying cars for all of us. So
Absolutely. Flying cars that can go from, let's put it this way. Our stage one is moving people from San Francisco to San Jose in the
yeah,
Bay Area. Phase two is moving people from San Francisco to LA. Phase three is we're talking about cross country, and there's probably a phase four to that is moving people, between continents. That's the exciting stuff that we're working here at Joby.
sign me up. This is great. I'm so excited that you're doing this because traffic is a real bummer. So,
I know.
well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Srinivas. For anybody who wants to maybe connect with you or learn more about what you're doing and Joby Aviation, where would you send them?
My LinkedIn page, yeah, it's linkedin.in/Srinivas-Suresh.
Great. And we'll include a link for everybody so that they can access that. And then Joby Aviation website.
Yes, joby.air should lead right up to what you're gonna see in couple of months coming near you.
Exciting. I love it. I love it. Srinivas, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kerrie. It was awesome.
All right. That was Srinivas Suresh, supply chain lead at Joby Aviation. And to everyone listening, thank you for being a part of the future of manufacturing.